Hello and welcome back to Analog Comics. It's 1st of January now that I'm filming this, and I was supposed to do this before the turn of the year, but there was just so much to do with Christmas, some traveling and so on, that I decided not to take too much stress about it and film this whenever I got the chance, as this video is about the best reads of 2023. For me, 2023 in comics and in my life had two very different kind of phases. In the beginning of 2023, I was faced with some serious health issues, and that made the year so that the first half, the first 6 months, I didn't buy any new comics. But it meant that I took a really long look at my older collection, which is mainly European comics, and it was a blast. I got kind of reacquainted with certain older comics and series I have. And then after 6 months, when I got some good news about my health, my life kind of turned completely the other way, and I started buying comics, a lot of comics. But just so you know the logic of the selection I'm going to show you, these are the comics that I read in 2023 and enjoyed them, but there's a reason why it's these comics. Half the year I just read my old stuff, and then the next half year I try to buy as much as I can and find something to enjoy. So it'll be mixed of some very old stuff and some new stuff. But enough of the rant, let's see what I have here. The first book I have to mention in this list is something that I don't even own anymore. I gave it away. It's Andy Watson's The Book Tour, and I think that that is a perfect comic. I mean, it's perfect in what it's trying to do and what it's trying to be. The atmosphere it's just captivating. From the first pages, you're hooked. You want to know what's going on. And when you get to the end, it makes you read it again, and you will never look at the same comic the same way. It's a brilliant structure. But it was so good that I gave it to my friends. They have a summer camping. It's kind of secluded. It's in a remote area, so I took it there as a house guest gift, gave it to them, and I know they have never read any comics, so I thought that when they spend some time in the cabin, someday they will get bored enough to at least try to read it and enjoy it. But it's a comic book that I will buy again. I have to have it in my collection. And to continue with that, the next I have to mention is another Andy Watson book, Sunburn. Here the art is by Simon Gain, but again, a book with an atmosphere that screams that there is something wrong in the story. And I have made many of my friends already read it, and they all enjoyed it. And the graphics are beautiful. It's like postcard graphics every page. These unreal blue skies, and yeah, a lot of romance, but intrigue also. Great read. Next on the list is Asterix, and not just one, but all of them. And by all of them, I mean all that were written by René Goscinny. So it was Goscinny and Uderzo duo. This is the first time that I read all the Asterix in chronological order. I don't remember doing that before. There hasn't been any reason to, but now I decided to do it. Of course, I didn't stop here. I went through the Uderzo solo era and then the new artist era too. But this is the era I have to mention. There is not a single bad album in this run. It's quite a feat. And I was so happy that I still like this. Sometimes you grow out of things, but this was exactly the thing that I needed at the first half of the year. And I had a bit harder time, so this kind of warm humor helped me a lot. And yeah, and Asterix is also something that I've been kind of working on at the background, trying to get some kind of an angle to it, because I want to do a video about it. And then another bigger pile that I read, Pluto. Before the 23, I only owned the first one, and I couldn't find the rest in complete set. There was always something missing. But then I found the missing pieces and I had to read the first one again to get into the story. But it was really good. The art is super detailed. It has a really good world building. The story is, it just keeps you hooked. The way it builds and builds, it keeps adding characters. It keeps building those characters and then slowly combining all that info into one story. Like everything in this series is just brilliantly made. Highly recommended. And then a book everyone should read. My favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. This was one of the biggest surprises for me the whole year. First of all, I kept avoiding this comic because I thought that this is some kind of a horror comic. And that's one of the genres that I just can't find myself to get into. But then I looked reviews by Earl Grey, for example, and I realized that I've been wrong. This is not a horror comic as such, although the monster theme is built into it. This book screams ambition. Every page is ambition. The way this is done, the way it looks like someone sketching on a leaflet, and the way the form of this book, how it's made, it's also an effect of the story. It's almost like that first Matrix movie where you see all kind of really fancy effects, but they were not just effects to look good, but they were integral part of the story. And that's how I feel about this book, about, you know, how it's technically made. I just kept turning the pages, and in fact, the way this is made, just technically, it took my attention so much that I need to read this again, because it took so much energy from me just to admire what I saw that I was having hard time to focus on the story. Having to read something again, it's not a bad thing. And this is a book one. It's Fantagraphics publication, and Fantagraphics has already on their site info when the book 2 will come out, and it will be the conclusion of the story in here. I guess what I'm trying to say is that having read comics for so long, it's so amazingly fun and surprising to be surprised by what you see. You see something done in the form of comics that you didn't know could be done or existed. I like to find new things, but this one gave a bucket full of those. Maybe the biggest and best surprise for 2023. Next, another thick book, a collection of 13 albums from The Killer by Yakaman and Mats. I did a video about this also. It's actually my most watched video. It has about 10 times more views than any other video. It kind of coincided with the Netflix movie release and so on. It's a very cynical book, and it follows the thoughts of the paid assassin, the killer. And when I was reading through it and through the cynical thoughts of this killer, the way he's cynical towards the world, other people, everything, I think in other context I wouldn't like that. It could be even kind of feel that someone's trying to preach me something. But here, in this particular context of remorseless assassin thinking them, it just works. The way he is comparing his own work of killing other people, what's happening in the world. I've seen many other comics use this kind of very cynical look on humanity and so on, but it becomes a very cliche thing. But here, it felt like it belonged in it. As there is very rare places where that actually works for me, and this happened to be one of them. Then I have here a few European classics, like Clifton. It's one of those things that I went back to, and like that, this one also. I'm going to read the whole series, and it's also one of the characters that I'd like to talk to more about, maybe do a video on them. I know Cinebook has released, I don't know if all, but quite many of the Clifton series in English. They have them available. And the next one is Kubitus. This has come out in Finland also with another name called Muppela, but I think Kubitus is the original French name for this character. And as the graphics in the cover tell, or the back cover, it's just old school, marginal style fun. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted, fun action. And I have quite many of these albums too. They have long stories and then collection of short stories. And then I reread my Filemon run, and only 3 Filemons had been translated to Finnish when I was young. And this is the best of them. And I found out that also those same 3 albums were translated into English. I've done a video about Filemon also, so if you want to know more about it, go check the video. But this is my all-time favorite. It's like Hanging Castle. Fred is very inventive of how to turn the situation to something that you don't expect. But it happens with the visual clues on the panel. And it was fun for me to notice that this hanging castle, it's just hanging from a rope from somewhere. It still kind of pushed the right buttons in me, like thinking, what, how, what is going on? I get the same feelings as I did when I was a child reading this in the 70s. In a way, there's nothing like this. But on a good note, they started now bringing out more Filemons in Finnish. Storyhouse Egmont is bringing out the untranslated volumes, and they are bringing them out in a chronological order. So this is a very promising start. Just to give you an idea, here's one short story at the end of the longer one. It deals with Filemon when he's walking at night. He realizes that the frames don't move. The frame, the comic book frame is stuck. So even though he walks, nothing happens. He needs to fix the frame to get it moving again. And Fred has this kind of thoughts and visual gags. Sometimes there are mirrors that show time that will happen, or then they are lagging. So the mirrors are showing stuff that happened before. And he just keeps pushing those ideas further and further. And although original there were only 3 albums translated, this is one of the comics that has affected me the most. As a child, I felt that it kind of unchained my own creativity. Absolutely fabulous stuff. And the next thing on my random pile is Proteus Vex. This is one of the first reads of 2023. And in fact, it made so big impression on me that I made a video about this. So if you want to know more, there is a video about this comic. The only thing I want to say is that I want more. I hope there will be more collected editions of Proteus Vex. I know there are more stories coming out now. So the volume 2 of Proteus Vex will be one of my most wanted things for this year. And then some more European albums. Konvojen, or as the original name in French is Sillage, or in English, Wake. I have a video about this series on my channel. It's one of the first videos I made. This is one of my latest acquisitions to that series, and this is in Danish. My problem was that in English it was only available for 7 volumes. In Finnish they translated to 10 volumes. So now I have been buying the rest in other languages. I have the volumes 19 and 20 in Germany, and then I have from 11 to 14 in Danish. In fact, I just returned from a trip from Denmark, from Copenhagen, and from there I bought the volumes 15 and 16 also. So now I'm only missing 17 and 18, and then I have full run up to 20 volumes. But I've been reading this in different languages using the Google Lens translator, which I have a video also out about if you want to know what is the Google translator. But it has made it possible for me to read this series, because this is the reason why I like this series particularly is that it's kind of an obsession. Many collectors, they have some kind of obsession. They might be double dipping some particular comic or comic series, having them in different formats. You know, it's not more about the story anymore. It might be just to have all kinds of format or languages, whatever crazy stuff that is, that kind of passion that gets you there. And I'm kind of happy to have my passion in Konvojen so much that I have to have it in any language as long as I get the full story. So there is that kind of extra layer that I enjoy about this particular comic book. Also, when the series started in the first volume, it started this kind of thing in the background that has been growing and growing, and this 14th volume, Total Liquidation, it ends a major story in the background. And the next European classic is Sammy by Berg and Kovin. Sammy is this character, Sammy Day, and his boss, Jack Attaway. These stories are set in that gangster era of USA, and they mostly work as bodyguards in the story, and there's lots of bullets flying and fighting. And what I realized, I just read these two albums now, and I like them so much that I have to go through my whole collection. But I realize now that I'm older, I actually like this now the most. I have had this album since I was a kid. And this one I bought when I was something between 20 and 30, 2000 years ago. But I found myself liking them the most now when I'm over 50. Maybe it was the timing. I just needed some fun to take my head off my health issues, and so maybe it was that. But there is also, I know, for the first time I noticed this layer that I haven't noticed before. Some of it you can see in the cover here. This is supposed to be children's comic. At least that's the way these were sold back then, the Sammys. But there is this very adult layer to it. Like right here in the cover, you can see these ex-millionaires, because this is about the New York's stock exchange crash. So all these people, they are ex-millionaires who lost all their money and wealth. So they are jumping from the buildings. So what we see in the cover is basically their suicide. There's one guy with a gun in his head, pointing gun at his own head. And Sammy and Jack are hired by this one millionaire, who's millionaire at the beginning, as a bodyguard. And the only reason for that is that he says that it looks good on his millionaire boys club, because the other ones have also bodyguards, but now he has two. So there's just kind of fashion statement. But then the market crashes and all these millionaires, they become ex-millionaires in a night. And it makes the whole comedy in this very cruel. It's very cruel, but there's something that is on point. Very much on point. I'm saying just that this feels much more like for adults, although the graphics are very cartoony. The same here. Here in the very beginning, one of the pilots in the plane gets shot through the windshield by another plane, and there's blood. So there's also visible blood here, which I don't remember from any other children's comics. But here, Sammy and Jack, they are hired to guard this oil drilling platform by a sheikh. And here I found it really funny how angry the sheikh is. Like, his rage is beyond anything reasonable. It's just insane. And it's so over the top that it becomes funny, but it's also infuriating at the same time. And the main idea behind this guarding thing is that there are two sheikhs who are cousins, and they are competing with each other. And the only reason why this sheikh wants to find oil is to get enough money so he can buy enough weapons so he can kill his cousin. And both of these cousins, they are trying to kill each other or destroy their businesses. But every time they meet, they are very polite. And they both know that they both know, but they are very polite and talk as if the other one is almost an angel or a gift from heaven. And as soon as the other one is gone, the rage is back. The unbelievable rage of that sheikh. And now I'm thinking that, did I just choose the right comics from my collection? But I don't know, I have to go through all my Sammys and see if everything is on this level, because it's so long time since I read them. Of course, we need some Greg Rucka. It wouldn't be a good year without some of his comics. The Old Guard. The Old Guard was originally 2 trade paperbacks, like 2 story arcs. And this is like an additional part to it. This is the Old Guard, Tales Through Time, Book 1. So these are short stories that happen in the world of the Old Guard. Greg Rucka is one of the writers, but there are many others. In fact, there is Brian Michael Bendis is one of the writers. And I have to say that for me, that's kind of funny because I know that Brian Michael Bendis is some kind of big name within the comics. But since it's mostly superhero stuff, I've only heard his name, but I don't recall reading anything from him. I've seen his name in many of my books, but for me, he is the guy who's doing the forewords. It's usually in the cover, like the foreword by Brian Michael Bendis. And then I read these words by Brian Michael Bendis. Like, you know, it's something special, but I don't read his stories. But now here is one short story written by him. But here, I like the Old Guard in general. I like the way Rucka handles the immortality. The idea in the Old Guard is that the characters in the series, they're not immortal. They just can't die. There's a difference, and Rucka makes that kind of clear. There's some kind of cliches that I think that are necessary when you're talking about these undying or immortal characters. But I like the way Rucka writes them through them and around them and gets a good story around those things. He's the type of writer, he takes these ideas like what if they couldn't die, and you can see how he has really sat down and thought what it would actually mean for these characters, not just to make a Hollywood blockbuster or something, but what it really means to a person like that, how it affects their personal relationship with each other or how they look at the world. And I also feel that Rucka isn't going to put out more stories, like longer stories for this series, unless he has a good one. But I think because we're talking about undying characters, some of them are really, really old. So it's a good idea to have these smaller stories that are set somewhere on their timeline. And then one of my white whales. Once Upon a Time in France. I've been hunting this story in Finnish for a long time. It's 6 albums and they were really hard to get. I didn't even look for them in English because I thought that this is something that will never ever get translated. But then when one day I made a Google search and there it was, easily available in English and also in album format size. It's soft cover, but still really good printing. Let's see this kind of graphics. It's a story of a real person who starts selling scrap metal before the World War II, becomes a billionaire, one of the richest people in France. And then the World War II starts and he starts playing both sides, the Nazis and the resistance. And him being Jewish, it's a tricky situation. But what it turns out to be, this turns out to be a tragedy in so many levels for so many people. The characters are so complex, that makes it thick. Some of the characters are like composites. In real life there were more people, but they have kind of squeezed these many characters into one so that they make the story more understandable. But I also realized that this is not an accurate depiction of his life. There are empty spots that the writers had to fill. So it's based on a real person and true story, but still highly enjoyable, great art and a great story. And then there's Murs. Nothing particular to say about it. It's just great fun. One of those things that I thought, I'll go through it and see if I still like it. And I did. Peyo is master of simplification. The way he does panels and pages is that this is one of those comics that you could read this without any text. You could buy this Murs in any language and you still would get what's happening in the comic. The graphical style and the execution is so well thought out. It was something that Peyo put a lot of conscious effort to. He was really trying to get it so that children would get it even if they couldn't read it. But although my childhood is quite far away, I still enjoy the same things here. It's silly, light-hearted, well-meaning humor, and it's good for those moments when you just need that. And the next comic series is something that I have also video about, The Forever War. It's one of the best from book to comic adaptations I have seen. It might be the best. And even without that adaptation, if you haven't read the book, it doesn't matter. It's as well-made sci-fi into comic book format. This is a 3-album series. These are by NBM, very old and I think very rare. And they've been published by another publisher, I can't remember who now, but it's still available, but in a smaller format. But the story is so good that I encourage to read that. There is another like continuation story or side story that tells a story of another character, but that's not really good. That I cannot recommend. But this is it. The original, The Forever War. It's a story about the futility of the war. But as I said, I have a video out about this, so if you want to know more, go check that out. I try to link all the videos I mentioned in this video to the description so you find them easily. And then something new, at least new for me. This is a story called Swan Song. And it's Cinebook Espresso line. Espresso by Cinebook means that the story is concluded in 1 or 2 volumes. And it's by Babouche Dorison LC. I don't know any of these creators. I don't remember reading anything from them. I could be wrong. Swan Song Part 1, so there is a Part 2 which concludes the story. I don't have that one. I bought this from Finland because it was surprisingly there in one bookstore. And graphics are exactly what they say on the cover. I'll show you another page, some fighting. The story is set in World War I, and this group of French soldiers, they decide that, okay, we had enough. They are sent attack after attack into these battles that doesn't gain anything but just more dead people. Just both sides are just dying. They leave the front and they are trying to get to Paris to these authorities with a signed letter from other their comrades, and it's meant to end this battle. That's the idea. They are trying to get to Paris while the officials are trying to prevent that. And after reading the first volume, I definitely want to see how this ends. And now there's only 2 names to show. First is Pikovits's Spiru. This is translated into Finnish, Spiru, and these are by the new adventures of Spiru by new creators. And this one was surprising as it took the Spiru character, well, it put it back to this, or the bellboy costume, but also put it so that the time is just before the World War II. And it's not really a massive adventure. It's more like a mystery, but it's also very dark. And the way it ends, there is certain revelations in the end that are, well, they were kind of shocking, really. And this side shows the kind of side from Spiru that is never ever shown in the basic, more children-oriented line of Spiru adventures. There are times when I think that you shouldn't mess with old classic characters and do these alternative universe things, but every now and then when you ran into a good story, then you realize that it doesn't really matter as long as the story is good. And this one was. And by coincidence, the last one is something that combines new, old, European, American, everything, the world. The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. This is the Finnish translated versions. Took volume 1 and the volume 2, the additional stories that Don Rosa made later. It's almost impossible what happens here. I mean, I've been reading these duck stories before I knew how to. I actually learned how to read with duck stories. And the way Karl Barks did, he took those characters and he created a world. He made them tick. The duck stories would not even exist without Karl Barks. But what Don Rosa does into that world feels almost impossible. That he actually builds another layer that no one saw coming. The other stories of Don Rosa are more humorous and adventurous, but this has the layer of well, it's one of the biggest love stories in my collection in a way. I guess that sums it up the best. And love is a good way to end this video also. And that was my best read of 2023. And I know there'll be many similar videos coming out from other channels, and that's great. And now I have to go because I have to go watch all of those videos myself. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.